All right. Well, why? What were we talking about today, right? Um, it's why should we read these books? Why should we read books? I just obviously my last video was about all these books I've read this year, um, which I think is far. And then to be clear, I don't think I don't I feel as if I haven't read enough. Actually, I think my goal for this next year coming up is to read far more, um, and to try to accomplish more, learn more, figure out more. But I want to go over a few reasons to read beyond simply like, okay, why read this instead of watch a video um, for an hour, right? Why sit here and read Shakespeare for 2 hours or 3 hours or however long I don't know, take me like 3 hours, 4 hours to read this book. Why not just watch 4 hours of even like um a podcast you like, you know? Why not listen to something for 4 hours? Well, first of all, there's the obvious reason the reason people talk about, which I'll go over briefly, right? And that's the fact it's about sort of attention spans, about yeah, right? When we listen to a podcast, we're doing something else. We're feeding our minds. We're setting this precedent that um, focus is not something you have for a long time. It's something you have for brief amounts of time. You prove that when you listen to a podcast and you have to do something else. You're proving the point that you have no attention. Why is this important though, right? Why is it important to build a longer attention span? Um, Certainly there's quite a few reasons. One, we need to focus on tasks. We have to focus on understanding to fully grasp it, to fully achieve something, right? So when you have a problem in front of you, if you're able to only focus for 30 seconds, 2 minutes on it, you're not going to get anywhere, right? However, if you're able to truly deeply think about it, well, then we can find a solution. Um, and also, I think there comes this thought, well, I mean, it's cool if you don't have a long attention. It just means you move on from the problem, move to something else because you need something to fill your time. Well, there's so much value in solving these problems that lay before us, right? I think when we let things go, letting things go is very good. Obviously, it's important sometimes, but letting problems go is not the way forward. It's not the way of understanding, right? We're trying to. Sorry, my shirt is like weird. You're trying to understand the world. Was that an example of short attention? I don't think so, but it could be. Could be. Right. If you're trying to understand the world and find meaning in anything, find truth in anything, you can't simply throw it away or act as, and nothing is insignificant, right? Nothing is insignificant, and so by not giving it the attention it needs, you're wasting that potential for insight, as well as the fact that you're never going to find true insight if you continue to move from thing to thing, right? Idea from to idea. You must have some through line that you're following, and some end you may be reaching, right? Other reasons, less talked about, I think are important. Our world is not one that is an island unto itself. Let me be clear about what I mean when I say that. What I mean is our time that we live in, 2024, 2025 rather, is not doesn't exist just because of it doesn't exist rather independent of everything that has been, right? Just as you don't exist independent of all the generations that have come before you, and it's the same idea except for on a global scale, right? So, what does this mean? Well, let's look at our world then. The ideas we have today are always based on something. We like to think of creating new ideas as I'm pulling it out of thin air. It's not true. It's not true. We take in a lot of information throughout our life, far more than we could ever actually comprehend. And what new ideas are simply putting together different ideas in a new way, coming to this maybe different conclusion, right? So, what does this mean? What are you talking about? Well, what it means is all of the ideas that are in our world today are not independent of the past, just as our world isn't. And what we find is it is contingent upon another step before, right? I mean, just have it in front of me. Don Quixote de la Mancha, Cervantes, right? What is this book? Well, first of all, what is it contingent on? Contingent meaning, what is it relying on to exist, basically? Well, there's a lot of things. First of all, writing all these other ideas, sure, blah, 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 blah. But, right, it's about chivalric, however you say that, tales of chivalry, right? So these books, this vast library of books about chivalry, this helped to create this single book. Well, so did like the Bible, or all of these religious creations. Not only in books, but through the verbal spread of ideas, right? Oral, rather. But throughout human history, the only way to record information has been to write it down. That's the only way we have information from 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 years ago. The only way we have any information from then is because of writing, right? And so what you come to realize is, okay, our whole world is contingent on writing from before. Rather, ideas from before. Writing is the only way we have evidence of it. Cervantes is not, Don Quixote is not a product merely of the tales of chivalry, or the Bible, or anything, or it's also a product of those who were alive then, right? The comedy of the day, certainly his language development, the colloquial terms used in Spain at the time, right? Certainly politics of the time. We don't have an understanding of that, but it is all in this book, right? And so what does this mean? Like, what am I getting at? Well, if this book is contingent on a lot of things, like I've discussed, it is just as it is part of the contingency for our modern world. All of our novels, all of our comedy is coming from Cervantes, to some extent, right? He has always been part of the modern comedy, whether that be through one comedian who read the book, and then others using comedy from that person, or listening to that as a child, right? Then they create these new funny ideas, new things, right? And that all comes from and is all contingent on this book, right? That doesn't mean just read Don Quixote. It means read other literature. These books can be insights into the time. Now, why does this matter? You're saying, all of our ideas now are contingent on the ideas before. Sure, that makes sense, but like, our ideas now are cool, and they live without You know what I mean? Like we're chilling now. Well, as you move further down a path, rather think about it this way: as you make more choices down paths, right? To diverge, to roads diverging, and whatnot, right? At some point, you run the risk, and I think almost always do, go down a wrong path, right? What does this mean? Going further from the best possible future. The best possible future is one path through. It is not, and yet there's thousands of choices. And so, to understand the ways in which the absolute best, let's take comedy, right? We're talking about this, right? The most funny thing could be, you have to not only understand where we are, but also where we come from. So if you ever want to improve comedy, right, or your comedic chops, you have to understand, where did all of this comedy come from, right? Where did it all? Where does it stem from? And the closest we can get, not the closest, but one of the closest works we can have to that beginning is Don Quixote, right? I'm not gonna keep doing that. And so, okay, you're like, well, all right, cool, that's all right. So we're trying to read these old books so we can understand our world today. But then again, right? Again, sorry. It's understanding your starting point, so you can see the arc. And it is only when you can see the arc of development that you can see where we should be headed, right? You can also find far more fundamental truth. So, again, we'll keep going with comedy, although maybe it's not the best example. I think it's an apt one. You can find in Cervantes what is fundamentally funny, the fundamentals of comedy, because there has been no development. What I think you find, just as I think postmodern philosophy is it's a development upon a development upon a development, right? It's contingent on so many things, and it has taken wrong paths. But I'm going to take postmodern philosophy because I'm not as adept at comedy, although I certainly enjoy it, right? But in postmodern philosophy, you come with the idea that life is meaningless. And what is that idea contingent on, right? Postmodern is not just life is meaningless. It's a question everything. What are we doing in this world? Absurdism certainly is part of that. It's contingent on a lot of previous ideas which have been developed, right? Nietzschean ideas. And of course, Nietzsche was a critique of other religious scholars, right? And so, you only, though, realize we've gone down the wrong path. You only realize life's not meaningless once you read the literature that's further back, right? Once you align yourself again with the beginning, with the fundamental truth. The fundamental truth of philosophy is that our world is knowable. And I believe also that our world has some sort of meaning to it. Maybe that's not a fundamental tenet of philosophy. I think it's a very base tenet of philosophy. And so, as we've moved further down the line, they moved further from that truth and ended up divorcing themselves, right? Unmooring themselves from that fundamental truth because they took so many wrong paths. Not to say that they took only wrong paths. I think Camus and certainly Sartre understand very good ideas, a lot of very good ideas. Yet I don't agree with their absurdist or existential views, right? And so the whole point I'm trying to get at with this line of reasoning is that the reason we need to read older works of literature, fundamental works of literature, like Shakespeare, like Cervantes, like the Bible, is because they understand and they are closer to a fundamental truth that we are further from. And that's okay, right? Because we have developed better ideas. We have developed better literature to some minds than Shakespeare. We have certainly developed better comedy than Cervantes. But to understand the fundamental base ideas that are the through line through comedy, you need to read Cervantes. If you want to see the through line, the base ideas behind literature, behind plays, and rising action, you have to read Shakespeare, right? You have to read, Sophocles and all these other, Homer and all these other ancient poets, as they were called, and playwrights. That's the point. I feel like this video's middle of the road, but that's okay. Yes, one last thing I wanted to touch on. That's kind of funny, but rather, I am doing this. Why am I doing this? Why am I making these videos? I know nobody may be watching, and I'm okay with that. Certainly not the reason I'm doing it. To understand my own ideas is certainly one of the reasons. But if anybody does happen to watch, to understand a different perspective by having them tell me or share their point of view, and I think that's very interesting to me. And so if anybody has ever watched any of my videos, and you're watching this one now, and you've come to this point, please tell me, how do you see my ideas? Certainly not just this one, but them as a corpus, as it were. I think as my videos go on, you'll see my ideas develop, and I don't know. I pray I find deeper insights. I know I do not yet know the reason for these videos, but I know it will appear. I know it will appear. Not that I feel like it's pointless. I have fun. I have a good time. And I think it's interesting and it's helpful for me in the short term. But I think there's a larger reason that I cannot yet grasp. Just as I think there is with many things. So, let me know what you think. Always. Very interested. I am, truly.